Coming to Avant Bookstore for this amazing event. Thank you all for coming. We're really excited to have Jay Ponti, did I say your last name correctly? Jay Ponti here tonight. We have copies of Be the Revolution, so after the event you're welcome to grab a copy. We also have these really amazing shirts too. And you're all here for tonight, so I'm going to keep it short and I'm going to welcome Jay Ponti.
Thank you very much for having me. Thank you to Schwa and to Sugar. Thanks everyone for coming in the middle of this gosh darn heat wave. It's crazy.
It is. It's regular.
Wow.
It's regular.
Talk about end times. I mean, I like a sauna, but not if it's everywhere. Literally everywhere. But yeah, thank you everyone for coming. Really looking forward to my conversation with Val. Give her a hand for coming. And thank you everyone for making the journey out. It's a tough time, it's a tough time. So before we start, what we'll do is I'm going to read a little bit from the book, and then we'll have a dialogue, and then we'll open up for a Q&A. But before I get into it, I'd actually like to kind of take a temperature to see what people might be interested. There's a lot going on right now with the inevitable train wreck that looks like the Biden campaign, and so this is a very relevant conversation right now because this book is about a populist movement that ran Bernie Sanders as a tactic. And I think this is really important because the purpose, one of the messages of the book is to shift the conversation from what I call the consumerist approach to politics, which is, we like to look at candidates like this is my favorite kombucha. People look at candidates, we've been so conditioned by capitalism to identify as consumers that this is our prime identity, and our only function in society is really to be good consumers, to contribute to production, or to be consumers, to consume, to buy stuff, and that extends to our politics. And so we look at candidates like products, and we generally gravitate towards the candidate who most reflects ourselves in some way. And the Bernie campaign was different. It was very different. And this history has been mostly stepped over, rewritten, and the predominant narrative is that Occupy Wall Street failed. Bernie went viral because he appealed to unrealistic millennials, and that's just not true. Of course, he did appeal to millennials because of the platform and because of his authenticity. But what isn't known widely is that he didn't want to run. I can say this having, knowing members of his family, and he did not want to run. He didn't want to put his family through, the rigors of an election. Who would? And that's one of the reasons why we loved him as a candidate, is he really clearly was not a psychopathic, power-hungry maniac. That we could tell. You could tell. And I remember there's a story in the book in 2015. There was an event called that Marianne Williamson put together called Sister Giant. It's where I met Bernie for the first time, and I didn't know it at the time, but there had been a campaign run by Progressive Democrats of America, and there was also a lateral campaign happening with Occupy activists to push Bernie to run. PDA, which was founded by Tim Carpenter, they were traveling around the country bird dogging him, saying, "Run, Bernie, run." And this is where I met Bernie for the first time, and I remember the whole place. Marianne said, "Bernie, will you run?" Because everybody knew that Clinton would be the inevitable nominee, and it would be a continuation of neoliberalism and warmongering and everything we knew it to be. So there were two simultaneous efforts that were run. One was run by a group called the People for Bernie. Now, these were Occupy activists. These were OG Occupy activists who first started a campaign called Ready for Warren, and they asked her to run. They basically did the same thing. She said, "Can we earmuff? Can we earmuff him?" She said, "Leave me the fuck alone." and then so they pivoted to Bernie. Simultaneously, Tim Carpenter and P. Day were running a lateral campaign to what's called bird dogging, is when you confront a politician at an event, and they bird dogged him across the country with signs saying, "Run, Bernie, run." And so I met him at this event, and it's really clear she's like, "Bernie, are you going to run?" And he was like, "Listen, there's no point in me running if there isn't a grassroots movement behind us." And she's like, "Well, what do you think? Will you be behind?" The whole place stood up. And actually, I wasn't sure at the time. I actually wasn't sure at that moment because he looked so sheepish. He was standing up there. He looked so. He's like, "Wow, really?" And I was like, I wasn't quite sold. And then I went to meet him afterwards at the fundraiser, and I was used to politicians. We'll do the G-rated, kissing my butt. I was kind of used to a certain amount of niceties, and I went to talk to him. I had similar. I knew people in common. I'm like, "Oh, I've worked with." And he's like, "Yeah, good kid, good." I'm like, he's like, "Yes, yeah, good, okay." And I was like, "What just happened?" And then I went home and I started watching. I watched this video of Bernie talking to, doing a hearing with Alan Greenspan and just absolutely eviscerating him. Absolutely eviscerating. I went, "Oh my God, it's him. It's Bernie. Oh my God, they're right. It's Bernie." But this is really important because he didn't want to run, and the People for Bernie activated the Occupy network across the country. So they sent it out to the list. So, people like Charles Lenchner were on the Occupy Tech Ops team. And so they sent it out to the list, and they did a campaign well before Bernie announced of 99 events for the 99%. And that became a lot of the local groups for Bernie first came out of that 99 events for the 99%. And it's so important because the whole frame of the conversation was about people building power, working class people, the 99%, building power and using that power to leverage that and to align with a candidate as a tactic and as a strategy. This is so profoundly different than the rest of the American political conversation. It's profoundly different because, the frame is always, our voice really doesn't matter. And in this moment, there's never been a time when it has mattered more. It really, really, really matters. It really, really matters. And in the aftermath, which I also talk about in the book, Bernie created he was a lightning rod. His campaign was a lightning rod for the greatest activists in the country. And it activated a whole new generation, multiple generations of people who stood up. And in 2020, the Bernie Sanders campaign was the first campaign in American politics to ever win the first 3 primaries in the history of either political party. Won the first 3 primaries, and he was on an inevitable, and it looked like his momentum couldn't be stopped. But of course, progressives got out organized because what you might call the neoliberal contingent, the consultant class, working with what you might call the political establishment, the Democratic establishment. They had been organizing, and again, this is also in the Bernie 2020 chapter. They had been organizing meetings with wealthy donors, so people like Neera Tanden from Center for American Progress. Mayor Pete Buttigieg was sitting in on those meetings with wealthy. I mean, is that weird? You know. So for those of us who have been working, you know, inside and outside the political system, this isn't going to come to as a shock. But what I hope this book is able to do is demonstrate the power of one or small groups of individuals who have fundamentally changed the world. And I don't mean that as rhetoric. I don't mean that as rhetoric. Like it has happened. And there's a chapter on Divest LA where we talk about the divestment effort. There's a movement that a campaign I started with Susan Sarandon called #BankExit for the Dakota Access Pipeline that asked people to take their money out of the banks funding pipelines, the Dakota Access Pipeline, but also private prisons, immigrant detention centers, and whatnot. Mostly it was for the Dakota Access Pipeline. And then that campaign just spread like wildfire, and it spread to civic divestments. And then it inspired, there was a group in Seattle called Mazaskatoks, which means money talks, indigenous organizers who started a civic divestment campaign. And then we're talking billions of dollars. And that inspired a group in LA called Divest LA, which then I joined because of doing that work. And as a small group of mostly millennials, no money, and in the end, we beat Wells Fargo straight up, and the city of LA divested $8 billion. $8 billion, not just divested, but where they were able to change the whole request for proposal, the RFP process, unbundle 800 accounts, and changed the RFP process, which means that they're to a point system, so that if you're a bank that was invested in fossil fuels, you go to the bottom of the list. And it's really important because this is the time. It's so easy for us now to be disillusioned, and there's a lot of reasons to be disillusioned. You know, the future looks quite bleak. It does. You know, we have fascism is on the rise. You know, it's growing in momentum, enthusiasm. It's a global movement. It's a global movement. There's also a chapter in this book where we was part of a group that I now use the word group loosely. There was a network of people of citizen journalists that were tracking who was behind QAnon. But I think that it is still I think a lot of us are still underestimating how dangerous this neo-fascist movement is, and it is a global movement. And beyond that, we obviously have the climate crisis is here. It's here. I mean, it's here, and people are dying. 60,000 people are dying a year because of lack of access to healthcare, and and we're having to watch every day the genocide happening in Gaza, and it's just there's a lot. It's impossible to live in America right now, or probably anywhere in the world, and not be traumatized. But part of the pathway that I hope is in solidarity, and it's capitalism. One of the functions of capitalism, especially late stage capitalism, is something called atomization, which is the breaking down of something bigger into small parts. The small parts now mean us. We've been broken. So there used to be, unions, of course, are having a comeback, largely due to these efforts. And you can see an unbroken lineage from Occupy through the Bernie campaigns to right onto the rebirth of American labor. And there's a whole chapter in the end talking about the rebirth of American labor with especially the populist labor movement, which is Starbucks, ALU, and some amazing work. And a lot of the activists, a lot of the organizers are again coming out of these movements. But solidarity is really the medicine. It's really social media has us alone, and it's like I talk about the Plato's allegory of the cave. It's like if you're not familiar with it, well, you can Google it. But it really is like we're isolated and alone, and this is one of the reasons why Amazon is the most profitable company in the world, because we're essentially we're alone, and we feel this soul-crushing desperation, and this is very good for business. There's a reason why Amazon is the most profitable company in the world. And so my hope is that like these students are experiencing, this book came out about 9 months ago, like these students encampments are experiencing, the medicine is really getting out from behind the keyboard and coming out like we are right now. This is where this right here, or doing trainings. This is really my medicine. This is my medicine right here. When we can look each other in the eye and talk through these things. So we're talking about. So maybe usually I take a kind of a pulse to see what everybody might want to hear from the various chapters. But I might call an audible today and I might just read a little bit from the end, because it is a spoiler. It is a spoiler, but this is actually technically the epilogue, but I call it the prologue, and for reasons I hope that are clear. So normally we do this a little more anarchistically, a little more democratically, but this time I think I'm just going to call an audible and kind of go with the flow in the moment. Okay, so this is from my book, Be the Revolution, How Occupy Wall Street and the Bernie Sanders Movement Reshaped American Politics. Also, before I forget, one thing that is also, I think, kind of cool about this book is that it's actually the first book ever to feature over 85 QR codes, which link to videos related to the stories inside. So and a lot of it is like my cell phone. So when we're at the Democratic National Convention in 2016, inside everybody, if you're watching on TV, you think everything is fine. Outside, shit is on fire. And there are black barricades and 3,000 people pounding on them and it's, it's like not quite 1916 Chicago, but shades of it. Or when we're at Standing Rock and there's horrible violence and we have sniper rifles pointed at us, and they're just the police are committing horrible acts of violence against unarmed water protectors at Standing Rock. But you get to read the chapter, read the story, and then you get to watch the video, which I think is kind of cool. And it hits differently. It's like you can read a story about the 3-minute standing ovation Bernie got at the convention in 2016, and I do the best I can to transport you there, and I hope I do a good enough job. But then when you watch the video, you're like, that's a long time. You're like, that is a long time. So it kind of hits differently. So I brought a few copies, but this is from the last. This is technically the epilogue, but I call it the prologue. Prologue. This is not the end. This is not the end, but the beginning. Bernie Sanders is not the protagonist of this story. I am not the protagonist of this story. The story is not about any one of us. It never was. This is about you. Whether you're a veteran activist or have never organized before, this moment must be a new beginning. We must reevaluate the way our society functions and our entire way of life. We must look once again to organizing on a local level. We must look for new ideas to solve old problems. Here's one. As of 2019, there were over 550,000 unhoused Americans and more than 17 million vacant homes across the United States. Organizing is a wonderful thing to feel a part of. Getting involved with others who share a similar vision to make life better for our fellow humans is deeply fulfilling. Start from wherever you are. Find a few like-minded confidants, form an affinity group, but choose wisely who you let into your circle of trust. Remember that the most meaningful change usually happens at a local level. Your experience really doesn't matter. Experience comes to those who act. Abandon your identity as a consumer. Martin Luther King Jr. once wrote in his 1963 letter from Birmingham jail that freedom is never given voluntarily by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. Bring local leaders together to organize coalition-based progressive primaries and work together to discuss the issues facing your communities. Create meaningful experiences together, ones that foster solidarity. Focus on transformational relationships. Don't be transactional. Align with candidates and policymakers that will be your allies. But remember, in this realm, there are no permanent friends or enemies. Build fusion coalitions with inside-outside strategies. Occupy the structures of power. Study prefiguratism as a concept and think your plans through. Prefiguratism is a concept that talks about taking action symbolically or performatively, but that lack. So, when we go out and we march, it's good to march. You should go out and march. But we go out and march and we say, whose streets? Our streets. They're not. Okay? Like in Occupy, people were going, we're not leaving. And I'm like, no, we are leaving. No, we will. Like they're going to come and we're with jackboots and we are leaving. That is going to happen. So prefiguratism is I talk about a concept on the left that focuses on performative actions that don't think all the way through the strategy that's going to bring about building power and changing systems. So that's what I talk about. I talk about prefiguratism a lot. Great book. Another great book, Hegemony How To by Jonathan Smucker. He talks about prefigurative politics in that a lot. He was an Occupy organizer. I digress. Always know your outcome and how it will play. Let us bring all movements to stand together as one. Create voting guides to educate and inform your community. Share your resources. Heal your trauma. Your triggers are your treasures. They illuminate the path to wholeness when we are brave enough to face our shadows. Performative wokeness is not anti-racism. White supremacy, patriarchy, and colonialism live inside of us. Do the inner work. Meditate every day. It'll change your life in ways you can't imagine. You are more powerful than you know. Challenge your biases and assumptions. Embrace self-care. Don't just do it to put yourself back together, but make it a regimen and a way of life. This will give you longevity and make you a better comrade. You cannot liberate others if you cannot liberate yourself. Transformative justice means tolerance, patience, and compassion. Call folks in before you call them out. Create processes for mediation and transformative justice. Never underestimate the power of cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony is a concept put forth by Gramsci, Italian labor organizer, which talks about how the ruling class uses culture to condition our minds. Hack into culture and transform it. Seek out artists and creatives who understand the language of the heart and what stirs it. Don't just react to the opposition's plans. Think ahead and control the narrative. If you don't like or agree with this book, write your own. Make spicy memes. Make documentaries, short ones, long ones. Tell better stories. When you do, don't just talk in the language of your particular group, but speak so that others outside of your clique can receive what you have to say. Try to connect with what is important to those you hope to draw into your movements. Use language that they can hear. Be bold, be brave, be powerful, but above all, be kind to your comrades. Be true to your word. Your word is everything. Don't gossip, and try not to take yourself so seriously. This is hard. I'm like, oh, that's pretty good advice. Even if the work is heavy, there's no reason that we can't also have fun. As Alan Moore once said, a revolution without dancing is a revolution not worth having. Enthusiasm is infectious. Be relentlessly passionate, especially when the vibes are heavy. Some people have fun. Some people are fun. If you feel like you're struggling, it's because you don't have enough support. I'll say that again. If you feel like you're struggling, who am I the only one that relates to this? Am I the only one? Okay. I didn't think I was the only one. No one succeeds by themselves. Don't be afraid to be vulnerable. It is impossible to have been raised in America and not to have experienced trauma. Do the inner work to heal. There is no pathway to societal liberation without personal liberation, and vice versa. Accept that the life of fighting for justice will break your heart. It will break it over and over again. It will leave you wanting to crawl into a little whimpering ball in the shower at times. Let it. Your heart will heal stronger in the broken places if you do the work. There is no birth without pain. There is no magic without sacrifice. This will give you a medicine that you will carry and to heal others. It will help you build resilience. Learn everything you can. Seek out mentors who are older and wiser and more successful. But don't be afraid to learn what young people can teach about the changing world and the fresh perspectives they may offer. Be patient with them when their views lack perspective and the wisdom that comes with age and experience. Organize leadership trainings to build capacity. The work will often be thankless. In victory, you'll give your team all the credit. In defeat, you'll take the blame. People will even blame you for things you never did. You will get past it. A pure heart is the best defense. And eventually, if you are consistently a person of character and integrity, those minor character assassinations won't matter in the long run. Earmuffs. Don't be an asshole. Honor people's time, especially when they give it freely. Honor them for their contribution. Do this publicly. Make sure you tell them directly and make sure it lands with sincerity. Strive for excellence, but don't let the idea of perfection be the enemy of the good. Perfectionism is self-hatred. Oh. Understand the complexities of the problems, but don't let your focus be held captive by them. Don't give in to anger and despair. Above all, let your actions be guided by an incomparable love for all humanity. Forgive everyone, especially yourself. It is said that holding on to bitterness and resentment is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to die. This doesn't mean to accept or condone evil. The greatest alchemy is to transform this anger into loving, courageous, conscious, strategic action. Anger is a fire that burns out quickly. Stay committed to the footwork, but surrender the results. At the end of the day, it is about the hearts we touch and the lives we positively impact. As Bell Hooks once said, the transformative power of love is the foundation of all meaningful social change. When all else has fallen away, love sustains. Envision the world as you wish it to be. Make big calls to action for sweeping change. Paint a picture people can see in their minds. Passionately enroll emissaries that can carry your message. The one thing we definitely got wrong during Occupy was when we said there are no leaders of this movement. We should have said everyone is a leader of this movement. Remember that no one is coming to save you. If you are looking for a savior, look in the mirror. Who knows, you could be the next Bernie Sanders. Find like-minded people who align with your values. Start an outlandish and foolhardy quest to make a difference. Fail. Learn from your failures. Take away the victories, no matter how small. Build victory gardens. Play to win, but hold fast to the moments you share with those who stand with you and for something greater than themselves. Cherish those who honor you, stand with you, and are willing to tell you the truth even when it's something you don't want to hear. Choose your allies wisely. Admit your mistakes and shortcomings. There is no problem that cannot be solved through committed souls working together with love, wisdom, and vision. As the old adage says, we do not inherit this earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Despite the ugliness, the divisiveness, the fascism, the war, the racism, the inequality, there's still so much beauty in this world, and the generations that follow deserve a chance to inhabit a livable planet. The climate apocalypse is now. It is as Tennessee Williams once said, we live in a house on fire. No fire department to call, no way out. Just the upstairs window to look out while the fire burns the house down with us trapped locked in it. Only the people's movement to overcome the regressive systems placing greed and power over life will save us. You are that movement. So if you are still looking for someone to save you, look within. In her novel, The Dispossessed, Ursula Le Guin said, "We have nothing but our freedom. We have nothing to give you but your own freedom. We have no states, no nations, no presidents, no premiers, no chiefs, no generals, no bosses, no bankers, no landlords, no wages, no charity, no police, no soldiers, no wars, nor do we have much else. You cannot take what you have not given. You must give yourself. You cannot buy the revolution. You cannot make the revolution. You can only be the revolution. It is in your spirit, or it is nowhere. The time to do all of this is to make a stand is now. And remember, all things are possible." And in case you forget, it's on the cover right here. So yeah, we'd love to have Val come up to
Yes. When we're done, can we do a Q&A with you too?
Yeah, for sure. So welcome, Val, and I'm gonna let Val introduce herself and tell a little bit about your work.
Thank you. That was very inspiring, too. For those who don't know me, I'm Val Thomason. I just recently ran for local office here in Nevada as a progressive running against the establishment. I actually got involved in 2016 with Bernie's campaign. And when I first got involved as an organizer, I was really the last type of person that becomes an organizer. I lived in a weekly rental, which is, basically a motel. I made $8 an hour. I did not go to college. I was a high school dropout. So nothing about me really fit the progressive mold. But Bernie inspired me. And from there, I started organizing with everybody pretty much in Nevada. I started organizing with the DSA. I went on to some Democratic campaigns that were less progressive, but I learned a lot. And then I went to Bernie 2020, some of our local candidates, Javon Jackson, and with the DSA, I've been involved in like direct action and things like that. I'm just rambling at this point.
Oh, ramble
A lot of things. And then that led to me deciding that I wanted to run myself, because the more that I started to organize in Nevada, the more I really noticed that none of our local legislators are at all progressive. I wouldn't even say most of them are center-left. And last year when I was at the legislature, am I talking too much here?
No.
Okay.
Go.
When I was lobbying at the legislature, I was calling these legislators and asking them for rent relief. I was asking for, wage increases, for any bill at all to be written about childcare, and none of them were willing to hear it. Even the bills that got somewhat close to those things, I watched with my own eyes. With 3 lobbyists, we had a rent stabilization bill on the table. 3 housing lobbyists walked in, said, "No, we don't support this bill," and it completely shut down the conversation. There was no more conversation about the bill. They put it down, they walked away, and they never spoke about it again.
So you were activated by Bernie 2020, but Bernie 2016. Okay, OG. So you were activated by that. Joined the political revolution, got in the game. What were the hardest lessons you learned as you challenged power? Right, because we start off. There was a meme I think that just perfectly. There was a 2020 meme that showed the Care Bears for Bernie 2016, and then it was like the Ewoks. It's just like there was a sort of like, I think a lot of people had this Pollyannish idea when they're like, we're gonna go change the world, and the old Occupy heads were like, That's adorable. we're like, buckle up, you know, and then of course those who had come before organizing at the WTO. So there's always, you know, people who have, you know, going all, you know, the anti-war movement against Iraq and the anti-nuke movement. There's been so many, you know, Ferguson. There's been so many convulsions. But for you, what was sort of the biggest like challenges as you really made a real go of it to challenge power?
Yeah, you're right. Actually, when I first started, I was very like Pollyanna. I actually thought the Democrats were gonna like Bernie. I was like, yeah, he's just the next step up from Obama. This is gonna be great. They're gonna support us. Most shocking to me has been how powerful and how overwhelming the power is. Like when I was with Amy Villela, I don't know who here remembers Amy.
Oh, yeah.
People that she had known for 10, 12 years would suddenly not be seen in public with her. You know, they'll come for your life. They'll take your job from you. They'll call CPS on you to try to get your kids taken from you. Their power is all-encompassing, and there is absolutely no bar in this world that is too low for them to cross.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in your own leadership, it's like 'cause when you run for office, it's a different thing. It's a different thing, and I've supported a number of campaigns. I've run, you know, I ran a campaign challenging Pelosi to the left for a candidate named Shahid Pawar. So I was a senior advisor in that campaign, but kind of a de facto campaign manager because for a lot of the time we didn't have one. So, but it's different. It's a whole different ballgame, and as a leader, it's so demanding. I've seen a lot of candidates, not progressives, who got into the race, not wanting to fully embrace the arc in the crucible that it means. But as a leader, if you can, just talk a little bit about your process. What did you learn going through that process yourself?
Well, as the candidate?
Yeah.
Yeah. To be honest, there's almost no point in pulling punches. Because the truth is, I have friends that are like that who ran for office, that I won't name because I don't want to embarrass them. But they were afraid to take certain stances because they didn't want the establishment to come after them. And they still came after them. You know, you don't have to be a far left radical for them to come after you. So you might as well be the most authentic person that you can be. Not to mention the fact that if you're not being the most authentic you're not going to build up a movement. You're not building up people who are going to follow you because they don't trust you either.
What were the hard lessons though that you had to, like in your as a leader, you know? Again, I wasn't with you, but I imagine, I'm just going to guess, that you went through a process. You know, it was a transformative process. I'm just curious, what was that like for you?
I'm afraid I don't fully understand the question. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, just you know, going from somebody who's playing more of a supporting character to then it's on you. You know, you're leading. You know, your name's on the ballot, your name's on the flyers. You know. And then there are people who are looking to you, you know, to guide them. And then there are people that you need to guide you. You know, just as a leader, what were the biggest challenges going through that process, and what did you go through? Like, you know, does that make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Now I get it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say the hardest challenge was, I feel like when you're in that role, people do look up to you. And I kind of resonated with what you said earlier, where people are almost consuming you as their favorite product. But when it gets tough, you can never show that you're sad or that you're scared or anxious, because you're the one who's giving everybody else optimism. So you have to constantly be in that role of being the motivator. We can do this. We can win. Follow me, and I will lead you there, even when you yourself are not sure 100% of the time.
Cool. Yeah, and so with these talks, you usually keep it pretty organic. So if there's anything you want to ask or anything that occurred to you while we're reading or anything that's on your mind, feel free to just shoot from the hip.
Yeah, I mean, I was curious about you know, you've written all of this, you've been involved in pretty much every movement we've followed, you know, for all these years. Which one would you say was the most impactful to you?
mostly, I mean, I'd say Occupy. Occupy probably because it was such a short time and my worldview changed so radically. And there's a story in the book about, I was an organizer in Occupy LA. And I'd done, I'd been community organizing since 2001, mostly throwing punk rock shows, never really in leftist organizing. And I got pulled into that because people knew I did concerts, and I got asked to come in to help organize a show for Ozomatli and Robert Reich. And I was like, and I just, you can't imagine it if you weren't there. Like, if someone had told us 6 months before that, hey, I got this awesome idea. Let's get 1,000 people and let's lay siege to LA City Council for 3 months. We'll all get tents and we'll just put, you'd be like, you are out of your mind. You are beside your mind. And yet it happened. And it was such a vibrant place of ideas. And it was electric. It was like just this punk rock circus. And that's the thing that I think we learned a lot. We learned that you can't make meaningful decisions with 400 people. I think we learned a thing there. You in a meeting with I think we learned a few things. But what is often not discussed is what a vibrant place of dialogue and discussion and ideas. And for me, just being in that and experiencing the energy, it was happening around the world. Like on the M15, there was a day of solidarity that was literally across the world, and you could feel the establishment was shook. They were shook, and to be there in that moment, to feel, there was like a before and after. Like before, you couldn't say, it wasn't cool to say class war. You couldn't even talk about socialism. Like and like I don't specifically like identify as a socialist, because I actually think that ideologies themselves are limiting. I will say that I agree. I will say I agree. I agree, but I actually think that Bernie allowing himself to be branded this way, he's a social democrat. He's actually not even a socialist. He's a social democrat. I think that allowing him allowing himself to have the conversation shifted didn't help. But having said all that, for me the moment was, I think, getting hit with a baton by a riot cop, and I was like, the class war is real. But before that, you couldn't even talk about it. The idea of the 99% didn't exist. It didn't exist. And so I think Occupy for sure was, even though it was such a short, it was like I talk about it in the book as it's a whirlwind. It was like a whirlwind. And there's a whole chapter on the Poor People's Campaign where I talk about this is a theory of change. Like, this book it's a history, but it's really hopefully giving us a modern theory of change. And it talks about a model that finds the benefits of kind of old school Ella Baker style structure-based organizing with the mass mobilization of Occupy and that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely Occupy for me, I think. Although Bernie was also life-changing in so many ways. That, like, so many of the events just were life-defining for me. And but yeah, I think so. How about you?
Well, to be honest, Occupy was something I did kind of see, but I was like in poverty, I wasn't educated, so I didn't even know any of this stuff until Bernie. But I think you're right, because it's like the root of everything. That's even everything he said kind of just came from Occupy Wall Street.
Yeah, cool.
I got a question. If I can.
Yeah, we can.
When you guys are ready. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're just. Anything else you want to talk about?
One more question for you.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Something that people struggle with here that I see a lot in like organizing spaces is half of us basically want to give up on electoral politics and focus on direct action, and the other half of us, I'm a little on that side there, but I like both, wants to focus on winning electoral seats. Do you have a preference for either one?
Yes, I do. Okay, I want you to picture, why not both? Okay, so this book is a big stand for the concept of the inside-outside strategy. The entire book, over and over and over again, goes back and back to examples where the most meaningful change happens because of the inside-outside strategy. And what I mean by that is that, you know, direct action is important. It's powerful. Most of what I do is actually direct action. You know, I shut down banks. You know, like I get a bunch of people and we go to a bank and it is good fun. You know, it's good fun. They don't like it. And, mostly like we'll bring in some, you know, some of our indigenous relative, you know, organizers, and they'll lead you to it, but we'll go in and we'll shut down banks, and it's good, wholesome fun. I promise you, it is very fun, and they do not like it. So, you know, I've done that. I've done a lot of direct actions where I've disrupted Joe Manchin, you know, Secretary Clinton. I did a direct action where we're, you know, organizing against Secret Service. I think direct action is really powerful and important, and as a sustainable theory of change, unless on a long-term basis, you can leverage that power of the grassroots to pressure for either to stop bad policies or to pass our own. There's no system change. The system itself doesn't change because the people who occupy the structures of power make the rules, decide the budgets, and the problem is it's just hard because it is so entrenched. But over and over again, and I do argue for focusing local because, like I said before, like the campaign to beat Wells Fargo was an inside-outside strategy. There were marches, there were protests, there were direct actions, there was, good old-fashioned mutual aid and going to 400 neighborhood councils. But once we had, and I didn't lead most of that. It was actually Trinity Tran and Ben Hauk and some really gifted organizers who were leading most of that. So I'm not trying to take credit for that. I did mostly the direct actions towards the end. But I was in the mix, and I was an early adopter in that became a public banking. The next pivot from that became public banking. But it was leveraging that power of the grassroots. Before there was any of that grassroots power, no one would take them seriously. And there's actually a how-to chapter. The chapter on Divest LA is like a how-to chapter for how to run a local campaign, a divestment campaign. But it's really kind of like how can you run a local campaign to change policy. But yeah, so it's the same concept that unions have done since they've existed of collective bargaining. You strike, but you have people negotiating with the bosses to leverage for changes in policy, for better wages, for healthcare, for whatever it is, so it's both working together. And you'll find, I think, we don't need to test the theory anymore. Those who are only focusing on the electoral game, they get captured and absorbed. There's an example I write here where I think AOC so much had it down when that first time when they launched Sunrise Movement, and we had never heard of Sunrise Movement. They went and occupied Nancy Pelosi's office, and it was there was 3,000 blogs the next day, and it was just all of a sudden, instantly, there was a Sunrise Movement everywhere. And what happened to that? It was so much, they had, it was work, that worked, and then we've seen over time, again, I'm not trying to call anyone out, but I think we've seen, the Congressional Progressive Caucus lacking teeth. And I have sat on some of those, I've sat on the table, the progressive table that is, it's like the grassroots leaders who meet with the CPC, and I've sat on that, and it's really mostly inside baseball. It's a lot of inside baseball. Well, the table, no. There's like it's everyone you think, but they're representatives who meet and they discuss strategy, and I can filter out, but the base, all of us, are mostly completely disconnected from that, and that's what I hope to disrupt. I hope we can break through and disrupt this, even in our progressive or leftist movements, where we can have some hard conversations about what's going to work, because we don't have time. We have less than 5 years, according to the IPCC report. Like it's all just the dumpster fire is here and now. So our tactics largely haven't evolved since the 70s. It's kind of the same idea. So that's one of the reasons why I really wanted to write this book, is to introduce examples of what has worked, why has it worked, kind of deconstruct that, and share a theory of change. I hope that is sustainable for people who, and I'm not like, I didn't graduate. I have 1 semester of college. I've been on EBT. I've been a poor person most of my life, and I never had resources. Granted, being a white guy is an advantage. I'm not gonna, there's privilege. Of course, there's privilege. So I'm not going to compare my privilege to other people's privilege. But I've been a poor person. I was born under trailer park. I've been a poor person my whole life. My parents were like lower middle class, but in my adult life, since I'm 21, I've been, abject poverty. I've been unhoused for years, and well into my 30s, so that's kind of the point. To me, that's kind of the point. So I guess I've been talking for a little bit. I guess we'll open it up. Yeah, please.
Yeah.
No.
Oh, so you?
No, it's for you. No, please.
Well, I think you answered my question.
Sure.
I'm sure it's in the book, but then, it seems the overarching enemy is obviously fascism, but we have a barrier with neoliberal. And how do we get past the Democrats that are keeping progressives down? Like that's, it seems like you were kind of addressing that in the book, local and all that. But it seems like even with the Bernie, we got really far, and yet we still got the door shut down on us. So, how do we change that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think both answers are the same. What it comes down to, what I advocate for in the book, is local rainbow coalitions. I didn't make this up. Fred Hampton, the genius Fred Hampton, was doing this. It's basically, most of us agree, whether it's the fight for climate justice, racial justice, health justice, undocumented justice, unhoused justice, health justice. We mostly agree, but largely, whoever's focused on those issues, we're mostly siloed. We almost never work together. We almost never share resources. And not one of us has the resources or the capacity to do it on our own. So and this is one of the reasons we're doing trainings. I organize trainings to bring these leaders together. And, it's a transformational leadership training, but the goal is to get past it's to develop individual capacity, but it's also, there's a pop that happens where you start feeling a closeness, there's a closeness. And so I really think that it really comes down to, especially on a local level, bringing together those different factions and being intentional about it. And then from that point, if you're working together, if you can get a framework of working together, some cities are doing it intuitively, like Iowa City happens to be doing some rad stuff. There's a chapter in the Poor People's Campaign. That was a good start. There were some amazing fusion coalitions. But again, it is in the details, so it's bringing people together, forming rainbow coalitions, and having agreements, but discussing strategy. Can we organize town halls together? My dream is that progressives organize our own primaries. That's my dream, because we keep splitting the vote, and it's so it's ridiculous. it's a ridiculous thing that and then the neoliberal comes in, because a lot of times, like, progressives also don't take the time to actually understand how the system works, and so they run the table on us because they know the rules, like the actual rules, like. Right, exactly. But I do believe DSA took over, right?
Yes, actually, we did win that fight. Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
It was actually pretty simple.
You want to talk a little bit?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad I believe in the narrative. I think that helps us, because people saw, the DSA took over the Dem Party and that gave them motivation. But it was a combination. It was the DSA and it was the Bernie folks. Because when people showed up to caucus, they just fill out a form that says they want to be a part of the steering committee. And then when you're a part of the steering committee, you get to vote on who the board is. And you won Nevada by over 40 points. So every member of the steering committee was a Bernie person.
What do you think was the secret sauce?
For winning the caucus?
Yeah.
It was a really hard ground game, honestly. Like, we had no ads. It was literally just hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of volunteers knocking doors. We hit this entire city 4 times, just the campaign, the official numbers that I saw.
Thank you. Cool. Any other questions?
So first of all, thank you for being here. So I'm actually a college professor, and I'm still young, but it's been really fascinating and encouraging to see this younger generation of students stand up and speak out about a lot of issues. Just off the top of my head, the Israel-Palestine conflict, and our university here actually experienced a mass shooting a couple months ago. So a lot of students have been involved in bringing up issues about gun control and whatnot, but a lot of them, and myself frankly, still feel this kind of fear of speaking out because of retaliation from the institutional structures. And I take my job really seriously, and I think professors especially have a responsibility to encourage, their students. So this may be a little bit of a broad question, but what can I do to help encourage my students further?
What can you do to encourage your students further?
Yeah.
Can you just like sort of pulling that thread a little bit more?
Yeah, like I said, I think a lot of...
Because I heard about the institutional pressures as a problem.
Yeah.
What can I do to... So can you just kind of pull on that a little bit more?
How can I help them not be, I guess, afraid about speaking out because of pushback from leadership?
Okay. So in terms of specific challenge, what are some of the... Do they face expulsion? Do they face... what's the consequences of the pushback, the institutional pushback?
A lot of professors have actually gotten fired or received, I guess, just gotten in trouble in general. And a lot of students are upset with the president because they feel like their voices just aren't heard in general.
Mm-hmm. Great question.
Yeah.
So for me, I'm a big fan of trainings. I'm a big fan of trainings. And I find that, I think one of the critiques of Occupy, and there's some really, really amazing Occupy organizers. There were some, OG WTO 99 Battle for Seattle folks, Lisa Fithian, there were some really, experienced people who've done serious stuff. But from across the country, we were just kind of, trying to sew the parachute after we jumped out of the plane, right? And speaking to some of the students, I had to sneak into USC to do a teach-in because they had the whole university locked in. I had to sneak in through a parking garage. But what I do find is actually, sometimes it comes down to the hard work of, bringing in people who have experience and learning from them. Now, that doesn't mean that the kid, you got to find the balance, because young people also have such a vibrant understanding of the world. Like I always say, like if you're in an organizing group and there's no one under 30, you're in trouble. If there's no one under 25, you're in trouble. Okay? If everyone's over 60, you know what I mean? We're in trouble, right? So, but I would say like, and I do offer some frameworks in this book for suggestions. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but it really comes down to a lot of it is strategy. So it is getting down and having strategy. So if you know that the professor maybe get fired, who can you empower that won't get fired? My sense, if it were me organizing it, finding innovative and creative ways for students to be out front, to me would make a lot of sense. And there's so many. I go back to, I studied like Abby Hoffman and the Yippies, the Yes Men. I got a chance to work with some of the Yes Men. I looked at some of those tactics. I tend to favor the theatrical and the fun, those kind of tactics, because they're you can create viral moments. They're funny, and they're kind of hard to argue against. So, like, I didn't invent when Secretary Clinton's motorcade came by. We threw this was outside of George Clooney's house, and we threw $1,000 into the air, and yes, we picked up the money. Everybody asked that. Yes, we picked up the money. But it's and of course they tried to smear us on CNN by saying, "Oh, you're suggesting that she's an exotic dancer." We were playing, Rosemary Clooney's "We're in the Money," the skies are sunny. It's like, yet they tried to push that narrative, but it was still so, like, the imagery was made such a statement. It's hard to argue with, Or when I did a Joe Manchin disruption, where I just found out that he was. I was filming at this clean energy forum in Pittsburgh. This is the Clean Energy Conference that's having Joe Manchin as a keynote speaker. Joe Manchin is speaking at the Clean Energy. So we went in, and it was an idea that I had been workshopping with the Yes Men. They had a much more involved plan, but we went to Spirit Halloween, and we got some demon masks, and we went as. Now, also, backstory: he was. Joe Manchin held the Inflation Reduction Act hostage so that he could shove the Mountain Valley Pipeline through. Okay. It's crazy. It's like a climate bill. And so we went as his demon fan club. So we were able to pass Secret Service, sneak in these demon masks, and then when he started his speech, we were like, "Joe Manchin, you're the best!" We were like dressed as demons. We got our demon masks on. But I bring those tactics up because they're funny, and they're not the. Sometimes it is a grave situation and it requires gravity, and But yeah, I would. The broad answer is really think it through. Really think it through, and ask yourself the questions like, okay, what is the outcome? There's a practice in here. There's a whole section here on power mapping. There's a grid. There's a visual aid. So if we're power mapping. Who are the people that are making this decision? Who are the most likely to help us? And so there's a process called power mapping that a lot of people don't know about. And when you're, this is power mapping. So, and it gives you a way to try to target the people who are most likely to help you, the most likely people to be opposition. And so you come up with a plan and you try it. Not everything's going to work. But trying prefiguratism is when we get out and we just start getting placards. We're not really thinking it all the way through, because mostly the stakeholders, they don't care. They don't care, and they're like, they got a bullhorn. Cool. I'm gonna have a Cobb salad. It doesn't. unless it affects their day. Now, when I'm proud to say that they killed that deal, the Chuck Schumer deal, out the day after we did that disruption. They killed the deal. Of course, they shoved it back 9 months later in the NDAA. But for 9 months, we killed that deal. And it wasn't just that action. We were also working with Indigenous Environmental Network, who were also doing actions outside of Schumer's and Manchin's office. But it's a lot of words for saying have a plan. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I appreciate it.
Okay, cool.
Can I ask you, who funds your activism?
Me?
How do you get funding?
We have some T-shirts here. There's some lovely. We have some lovely T-shirts. Me, no. Me, no. I'm actually being serious. Personally, I don't. I mostly. There have been times that I have, worked on campaigns for specific, efforts, but mostly no one. Mostly, I had a realization around the time of Occupy. I was like, it's. I want to be able to look back and know that I did the very best I could to leave the world better than I found it. And I think a lot of us who came through Bernie, came through Standing Rock, came through, I'm sure George Floyd uprisings or Ferguson. It changes you. It changes you when you have those experiences. But yeah, mostly nobody. Mostly it's I do what I can to get by. I did a GoFundMe that a couple grand, but no, mostly no. It's all Love's Labor. Most of it is Love's Labor. Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody's got a rich uncle, I just want to touch on this real quick. It is actually a real issue because having been inside the nonprofit industrial complex, what it comes down to is wealthy donors. So what happens is a lot of these nonprofits don't bring people who are serious about actually changing things because they know they don't want to do anything that's going to make the wealthy donors nervous. The entire system depends on an ecosystem of wealthy donors, and they make there's an Upton Sinclair quote that says you cannot I'll update it. You cannot hope for a person to understand that which they're living depends on them not understanding. Okay, so but it is a problem, and I think one of the exciting possibilities with Bernie's campaign was the small dollar donations and the crowdfunding, but it's a hard thing to pull off if you don't have a big political issue. Yeah, rock. I didn't know it was going to be a mosh pit. Come here. High five. Nice. Are we gonna do a stage dive afterwards? Awesome. Cool. So, yeah, you had a question?
Yeah. So this is through Val actually, so I haven't read your book yet, but I am a student that's graduating soon, and I am trying to get into progressive organizing, essentially. And I'm split on what to do, how to do it, where to do it. Here or DC, because I feel like DC is like a good hub. Because I haven't met, or I haven't had conversations like this in ever. So I want to surround myself, like part of your prologue was you have to surround yourself with like-minded people. Sure. And that's just not a thing for me. It's a Sin City, there's nobody really caring about organizing. Not like shading people are here, I'd say more than 90%.
Susan, what I'm hearing you say, I don't know the landscape here in Nevada, because it's not where I've done most of my work. But is that true? There's no. Yeah. Here, let's pass it to the level. Yeah. Yeah.
So, there is actually a lot of people organizing. Though I know what you mean, because if you're just going about your life, your regular life, you're going to be like, I don't really see anybody doing anything because nothing big has happened in quite a while.
I know there are some organizations I just heard like tea and shade from like
Yes.
I'm like,
Yeah, I'm going to do the same. We're all going to come for you right now. Join our organization. But I remember mostly of the DSA, Democratic Socialists of America, and we would love to have you as well. Make the road is right next to you.
Actually, what we're going to do at the end of these, what we always do at the end of these talks, is I'll put the call out, and anybody who has anyone who has a mission is invited to stand up and make a short pitch. Now, again, I'm so sorry we can't make this a. Sometimes these pitches can go on for a while. Yeah. So we got to do the give the elevator pitch. But we'll go around and I'm guessing. Raise your hand if you either are working on something or you know people who are working on something cool. Okay, cool. So, but just to address your question, I want to be able to serve your question. Was the question, should I try to find something here or go to DC or what to do?
It was like 3 questions.
Yeah, go for it. What's the main question?
Like I'm about to graduate. I have to get a job, unfortunately. I wish I could volunteer, but
Sure.
But that's why the funding question kind of like really. I was very much looking forward to that answer, but I'm still kind of wondering like how I should go about like what's my next steps. Like
What's the next step? Okay. Okay. Now, so I would say this is the answer. Like, I don't know what you should do, but I know you know what to do. Hold on. I don't know what you should do, but I know you know what to do. The problem is that we get stuck up here. Okay? So I'll speak for myself. For myself, the answers come when I get quiet. And what happens is the analytical mind has all, well, what do I do? What about this? What about this? What if this happens? What should? And there's the analytical mind needs infinite data because it doesn't want to make the wrong choice. But there's not ever going to be enough data to make the right choice. But here's the thing, this is what I suggest to you. I suggest to you that there is a different operating system within you, and that you have an intuition that already knows what to do. But the challenge, this is why I really suggest meditating every day. Every single day. Because this book only exists because I didn't want to write this book. I never graduated college. I have crippling ADHD. Crippling. Like, it took me 7 years. This is the hardest thing, one of the hardest things that I've ever done. I didn't want to do this at all. When I started writing this, I had $100,000 into a progressive app. I was offered a national syndicated Pacifica radio station show, and another big campaign. And I'm like, okay, like all these things. And I swear to you, the thing that came was like, you gotta write this book. I'm like, I don't want, and I tried to avoid it, but over time, like your heart knows. And the challenge, and sometimes it's actually just making an imperfect start. Sometimes it's just getting out, and then it'll just happen. But what I do recommend is, if you can, take advantage of the wealth of experience you have around you here, because I promise you, DC is rough. Now, there's some great stuff happening in DC too, but I really recommend you take advantage of the grassroots knowledge here and get grounded, especially in that in that culture, because Washington is such a toxic place.
And started here because it's a swing state.
Sure. It's a really, Washington's a really, really toxic, and there's just like this infinite money feedback loop, and it just changes people, and the culture there is also very toxic. So I don't know what the right thing. Maybe going to DC is the right thing for you to do. But what I do recommend is get quiet. Even if it's 3 minutes a day, try to sit, and if you can get, it's like the waters of the lake, the mind's lake, are agitated. You can't see the moon reflected. But when the waters become still, that's when all the good ideas come. And most of these ideas for direct actions or campaigns or anything, they come in the still. And it doesn't always make sense initially, but it always makes sense in retrospect. And if you can get past this is useful for doing a math problem. If you need to do a math problem or something, involving, something, yeah, exactly. This can be useful, but I promise you that the operating system you have in your heart is much, much more advanced. Quantum computer. So does that make sense? Okay, cool. So we'll take one more question, and then I want to fulfill that promise, and we'll just take a moment, if we can, and go around, and we'll talk about what we're up to. Yeah, please.
First off, I'd like to say that if you're not going in with demon masks to disrupt it, why would anybody be at a clean energy event with Joe Manchin? So,
agreed.
I wanted to ask about the general landscape. It might be a pretty broad question, but of activism post-Bernie, it's been a long time since Occupy. I remember that was my gateway into activism. I'd already been convinced for some years, reading about anarchism online and stuff. And it almost feels like talking about a different era, like a product of a different era, because so many things in politics have just become neoliberalism, paving over it one instance after another since 2016, especially with the entrance of the electoral left. And I'm really thinking it would be a great idea to have something completely outside of electoral politics that could challenge things, simply because it's been so much of a hegemony of electoral politics over everything on the left, so much of a hegemony of the status quo not really being challenged, that anarchism almost seems like it's impossible and from out of this world. It seems like it's approaching things from a framework that's almost impossible to even conceive of in the modern political landscape. Challenging the state itself. I'm not really hooked, onto the anarchist label or the current sphere, because I think there's a lot of messed up things within. That people have just lost the plot. Arguing over different definitions, arguing over what does and doesn't. People have just become gatekeepers. You see a lot of all multi-pronged attacks from all directions, against this idea of a left that would be independent of the current, political landscape. So I really love that you've brought up things like, Abby Hoffman's movement and the Yes Men and the contributions of people who have done exactly what we're talking about. I'm just wondering how this kind of thing could be overcome, and if there's a way for that politics to sustain itself. I was part of Food Not Bombs Las Vegas for 5 years. There absolutely are people in Las Vegas doing the work. Lots of people are leaving town because rents are unaffordable. But there's a long history of activism here. There was actually a lawsuit long before I joined Food Not Bombs to challenge people. I'm saying this because some people even currently involved in restarting it don't know this. To fight for the right to serve food to people. And they won. After 4 years, the ACLU launched this lawsuit with a woman named Gail Sacco, may she rest in peace, to fight for the right to serve food. And they eventually did win that right to be able to do that in Las Vegas parks. They still continue to harass people and the like. They closed parks, but that happened. And I'm just wondering, because our organization has basically shut down because someone had taken tens of thousands of dollars, we didn't organize a real conflict resolution process or a real horizontal decision-making process to be able to prevent this, and so the group collapsed, and we have to rebuild from a totally new group crop of people who weren't even there when I was involved, none of them. And so I'm just wondering how the perpetuation of recruitment and retention, sustaining a group's presence into and past elections can happen.
It. Yeah. So how can we have this have longevity, right? Like, how can it be sustainable? How can the organizing be sustainable? So I hear a lot of the questions you brought up. So again, like, this is why, it's not an easy one-off answer. This is why I wrote a book about it, because there's so much to unpack. There's so much to unpack here. But if I could strip it down to some principles, I'd say first start off with, who's on your dream team? Who's on your dream team, and lean in, reach out, go get some coffee, and start talking about it. Because for me, what I've found over the years is a lot of this, the strategies and tactics do matter. The strategy. So like the theory of change matters, the strategy and tactics matter. Because if I just go in and invite a bunch of people, I'm going to have varying levels of ideology, of experience, and I find that it's actually most useful to start with a group of folks, that we can agree on a particular outcome or pathway. And then I imagine it's sort of like concentric circles, like a target with concentric circles. And then you start with that core. You come up with an alignment. I tend to lean anarchistically in that way, but I also don't believe in holding on to any of those monikers or ideologies, because I believe they're inherently divisive. Because you're going to get into, I have no time in my life to argue over Bakunin versus Trotsky or whatever the fuck. I don't care. Okay, it's like Fred Hampton said. Theory's cool, but without practice, theory ain't shit. So I find that get with a group of like-minded folks. Hopefully you like each other. Come up with agreements, and then start small, and then call others in. Try to create sustainable agreements as you go. But so the beginning phases, it's kind of like building a fire. You need the kindling. You can't catch the big logs, which is the broader culture. But it's a hard thing to go from that kindling to catching the bigger logs. So it does require skillfulness. So I say, choose your comrades wisely. Choose your comrades wisely, and then start with something achievable as well. That was one of the things I think about the Poor People's Campaign. We had these very Reverend Barber and Reverend Theo Harris are geniuses and amazing people, and we had multiple very vague goals, and it's like, we're going to end the war economy. Like, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? So but when we focused on did Divest LA, for instance, we're like, let's get LA to kick out Wells Fargo, and we did, but we didn't stop there. Okay. We thought it through. Or I would say, I'll put it on the core organizers. The core organizers really thought that through. And they're like, okay, even if we do divest, then what? Even if we get them to divest, then what? Well, only 5 banks can handle that much business, and they all suck, So then they came to, okay, we have to dismantle, because there were 800 accounts and they're all bundled together. And like, okay, well, we have to unbundle those. And then how does another bank not come in? How do we stop another bank coming in who's involved in fossil fuels? Well, there's a request for proposal process, and we can have a point system. Well, okay, then what? Then one of the Phoenix, one of the core members, brought up the idea of public banking. Like, what if we didn't need these corrupt banks anyways? What if we didn't need any banks? What if the people created their own bank? It turns out North Dakota has had its own bank since 1919. And LA pays $100 million in fees. Imagine what you could do with $100 million for people, for education, for frontline communities, so many different things, okay? Now, instead, some dude's got a G5, plane, or whatever the private planes are, a boat, Instead, we're subsidizing banks. And so, Public Bank LA was born out of that, and we passed public banking on the state level, which is crazy because it cuts out the Federal Reserve System. That's insane. And yet it passed on the state level. It passed. So there's exploratory committees to try to make it real. But the point is there wasn't any even pathway to have that happen, even if a city or state wanted to. Now there is. Does that make sense? I did the best I can. Okay, so thank you to Avant Pop. Thank you to Swan Sugar. Support this place. It's a gem. It's a treasure. I'm seeing some awesome punk rock titles and all sorts of cool stuff. They're rad humans. I'm so grateful for them. And thank you to Val Thomason for coming and her work and her example. And then, so just to close it off, what we tend to do is, if you can, please keep it to under a minute if you can. And let me know, does anybody have anything that they're working on? So we have head counts in the back. Did everybody scan?
Scan the QR code. Make sure you're registered to vote at your current address. You promised me you'd do it at the end.
Well, I'm still filming. I will do it. I promise. I will. But I believe it. He's going to be standing at the door. He's going to be blocking like LT. So we'll pass this around.
Just scan the QR code.
Scan the QR code.
Make sure you're registered to vote at your current address.
Okay. So, but does anyone here have anything they're working on locally they want to talk? I'm guessing the folks with the T-shirts maybe. Yeah. Okay. Come on down.
I don't think I need this. I have a loud.
We can just go over. It's your call.
Okay,
Everybody, we're gonna just give a second to.
really quick. I am the outreach organizing manager at Maker Road, Nevada. We are a 501c3. We do C3C4 work. Currently, we're working on I think it's going to be a bill. Cross fingers, toes, everything, to tax the rich. So we're going door to door canvassing. We're making phone calls, getting folks to sign our petitions and surveys to hopefully get the 17. It was 16 last year. It's now 17 billionaires here in the state of Nevada who get away with not paying taxes the way we do. We pay about 10%. They pay about 3%, right? So for a billionaire, that's nothing. We also work together as an organization to pass SB 92, which is the street vendors bill. So we want to make sure that they're able to, even though they pass it, they put a lot of stipulations. So they can't go into parks, as somebody mentioned. They can't go by schools. They can't go into certain neighborhoods. So we're still working on that because we spent like a whole few days at the commissioner's office, and we had 7-Eleven, Arby's, big restaurant, mom and pop, Latino people who used to sell corns and different stuff coming against these people who are just trying to make a living. So some of the things that we do, I'm going to make it quick, like, I know it's been more than a minute, but immigration justice, LGBTQ, housing justice, health equity, and to name a few. So if you want to get your feet wet, come join us, become a member, volunteer with us, knock on some doors, get your, because we go to DC too. So that's it for me.
How can people, how can people?
You can get us on social media. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, Twitter, X, whatever they call it. We even got a TikTok, but I do have some of my cards here with us. So.
Yeah. Oh, I have bookmarks for everybody.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
And I can do it already.
Anybody else? Yeah. You want to do the mic, or you want the mic?
No, I think I can talk loud enough.
Okay.
No matter what your cause, no matter what it is, first of all, remember, failure is not an option.
Absolutely.
That's one. Whatever cause you espouse, in order to change the system, whatever system we have, because it ain't democracy, and it ain't capitalism, and it's giving money to the rich, in order to change that, we need to cut off their funding source.
So do you have an effort current right now?
Yeah.
Underway that people can cut into? Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And I have cards.
Yeah.
And I
What
have,
is it called? What's the effort called?
I work with the producer of a docuseries called The Con. 5.5 hours. It's free to watch. Just go to thecon.tv. We made it free because all Americans buy our lies. So we're giving it to you for free.
All right.
Our website will be up shortly. We will give you the who, what, when, where, and why. Why we have a vicious cycle. The Fed gives the money to the banks. The banks give the money to the CEOs. The CEOs give to both parties, who are different sides of the same coin.
So it's called the Con.
The Con.
And I know is it Patrick?
Patrick Lovell is
Patrick
my-
Lovell, yeah.
And we talked too.
Yeah.
When I was with Real Progressive.
Oh yeah, great.
Okay.
Great.
Yes.
That was
So-
Steve
Steve
Grumbites. Okay, great.
Right.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
so watch the Con. Maybe y'all can organize a community screening. Something like that. you know?
We've done lots
Here,
of
here's a gift
screenings.
for everybody. Please
I'll do
pass this
screenings
around.
for anybody, anytime, anywhere, any
Amazing.
day. We also have a YouTube channel. So I say I share two things. I share facts, that's the Con,
Okay.
and I share food. And some people in this room know me because without the bureaucracy, and I was in it 2 decades ago, I can serve more meals now, no organization, no boxes, no bureaucracy, screw the courtyard.
That's a mutual aid.
Okay, that's what we do.
Thank you so much.
Okay,
Thank you.
that's what we do, and I
No,
just,
thank you. I'm gonna try to move on to others,
Go,
but
go.
the Con. So we have Make the Road, we have the Con. Please see her to organize events. And does anybody else have any other local efforts?
Well, I'll just say that I guess part of what she's talking about when she says she shares food is another group. Food Not Bombs Las Vegas, I already mentioned it.
Yeah.
I'm not truly, like I never attended meetings that they've had since this happened, but they've been trying to start a new, revitalized chapter of Food Not Bombs here. Roseanne's involved, and they're going to be starting soon. So I'm connecting with the people who are in it, and if you're interested, I can connect you with them as well. Roseanne
And what's your
is
name?
more involved. My name is Jonas.
So see Jonas, to talk about food, not bombs.
Yeah.
Awesome. And Val, you got anything going on? Anything else? Is that DSA?
Because DSA did not show up today, I'll do it for them.
All right.
But we also do mutual aid. Roseanne helps with that when she's not doing her big things. And outside of mutual aid, we're actually planning our next big electoral project. So over the next 9 months or so, we're also going to be going door to door, asking people to put pressure on their reps for rent control, for higher wages, and for universal child care. And if they do not give us those things, we are training and getting recruiting people to then run in those seats if they refuse to pass those bills.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay, so we have DSA, the con, food not bombs, head count in the back. Okay.
If I could just give the real quick pitch for headcount. So
Pitch it.
we are a nonprofit, nonpartisan voter registration organization, and being here in Nevada, we do. My husband and I are the local reps for headcount, and we really do emphasize the importance of your local elections. Like, if you don't care about the federal stuff, that's your choice. But these local elections make all the difference in Las Vegas. So we register people to vote. We make sure that their voter registrations are current and up to date, and we give them updates as to when are your primaries, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
And we're always
Anyone
looking for volunteers, and we have cards too.
All right, so we got head count, DSA, make the road, the con, any last ones, food not bombs. And listen, at the end of the day, you can also start your own. Every single one of these started with one or a few people who saw something, they wanted to make a difference, and they got some of their friends together and they did a thing. So you can always start your own. You can always start your own. Does that make sense? All right, cool. So we got some t-shirts. I think they're pretty cool. They're the only ones that exist anywhere. But thank you to Avant Park.
Thank you, Jay and Val, for coming out tonight. This is huge. We're really excited.
All right,
Come
thank
on
you very
up
much.
again. Yeah, come on up again.
Yeah, so but we can do this. I can do the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. You can sign.
It's to do with a line.
M-A-R-C-I-E.
I'm just not a problem.
Roseanne, I need a new card. Do you have another card? That's my new one. That's look. This is the new one with the lower trust. This has the overall. It's got my
Look, I don't have my